Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Sword Art Online light novel review. This is going to be my review for Sword Art Online Progressive Volume 4. Just came out about 2 weeks ago, in or around that. Would have had to review it much earlier, but Amazon.co.uk had problems. They told me like the day of release, I was expecting it to arrive that day, that yeah, we couldn't get it in stock, we'll have it in 1 or 2 months. And I think that's still the situation with ordering direct from Amazon.co.uk. You still actually can't order it. So I just ordered from a separate seller, I have it now, it's fine. So yeah, let's just quickly go over the cover and stuff like that. So really nice one, Kirito Asuna of course, but also Argo on the cover as well. I think this is interesting in that I wouldn't say she plays a really massive role within this story. I think why she's on there is because she is kind of part of the team that tackles the raid boss, and she does get a little bit more focused than I suppose usually, but it's not like the whole novel features Kirito and Asuna also having Argo with them. She's not in it as much as you'd think, but just based on her being on the cover. But yeah, there's that. On the spine, we have purple this time out for Volume 4, of course written by Reiki Kawahara. And on the back, we have our kind of more kind of cartoony style illustration of, this is Shivata here in the blue, this is Litten. Shivata we know from the previous books, Litten is new. Obviously this is Dragon Knights Brigade Guild that Shivata's from, and Litten is from the Aincrad Liberation Squad, so that's that. So yeah, this volume covers floor 5, which I'll show off in a second, but first of all, the color pages. We get Kirito and Asuna eating. This is just them basically eating the special buff item on floor 5. The second page is Kirito and Asuna kind of underground, facing an astral type monster, which you can see here, which Asuna is afraid of. Again, not a massive focus, it's just basically kind of 1 or 2 scenes that focus on that. And then I suppose more the focus of the second half of the book, but the boss fight against Fuscus the Vacant Colossus. And you can sort of see the team there. It's Kirito, Asuna, Argo, Shivata, Litten, Egil, and this guy's name is Hafner. And then I think the last color page is just our look at the floor. So this is floor 5 of Aincrad. And you can see it's a kind of runes focused floor. It's focused on these relics that they can find on the ground. I will say that the floor itself outside of the boss isn't much of a focus this time out, like it was in the previous 2 books with the Elf War quest line and the cool aspects of like the boats on the river and stuff like that. This one is fairly straightforward. They touch on it a little bit at the start, and then pretty much the plot kicks in, and it's more character plot focus with the guilds and stuff like that. But still pretty interesting that you have like an underground city there, an above ground city. You have kind of here you have these kind of catacombs, and then there's the labyrinth where the boss is. So pretty cool stuff there. But yeah, I'll start off with the plot here. Again, complete spoilers here, as I always do in these Sword Art Online reviews, so just be aware of that. The basic plot of this book early on is that the format of this book is split into basically the first third of the book is from Asuna's perspective, the second 2/3 of the book are Kirito's perspective. And the split that kind of we move away from Asuna into Kirito is basically where the plot takes off. So it's kind of Asuna's perspective as she experiences the floor for the first time, because it's more interesting seeing a new player experiencing the floor rather than Kirito, who knows mostly what it is. And there is a little bit of an arc within the first third of the book, why we focus on Asuna and then why we focus on Kirito for the second part. The big plot point in the middle is that Kirito and Asuna underground in the labyrinth actually overhear this kind of secret meeting between members of this basically just mysterious people talking about trying to cause a rift between the 2 big guilds at this point in the game, the Aincrad Liberation Squad and the Dragon Knights Brigade. They're basically saying that yeah, we fed information to the ALS that they should take out the boss before the DKB, because there's a special item up for grabs, and that will cause a rift within the group, and they're really trying to start something here. And Basically, the big reveal throughout this book, and for anyone who's experienced with the series, is that this is the early stages of the Laughing Coffin. So we get revealed that a character from the previous books, Morte, is a member of this. It's implied and more or less confirmed that a member of the ALS, Joe, the guy who kind of shouts out all this stuff to try and cause incidents, he's also a part of this. And then towards the end of the book, we get the kind of reveal of who the kind of boss is. Morte and Joe talk about their boss. That's who they're the people involved in the meeting. Then towards the end of the book, Poe, or whatever you want to call him, shows up. The guy who we know is the leader of the Laughing Coffin. He shows up towards the end of the book. Doesn't do a massive amount, but just it's a really kind of big moment within the series, because this marks a kind of shift that player killing is suddenly going to become a pretty big thing. We've had hints at it in the previous volumes with stuff like Kirito could have almost been player killed depending on the reaction to the end of the first boss battle. Nezha and the Legend Braves could have been killed in the third floor. And then there was an incident obviously in the last book over like the groups and how they should form and stuff like that. And it's implied that Joe was the one who kind of caused a lot of that, and then POH was the one who supplied a lot of the information relating to that. He was the one who fed the Legend Braves the information about how to perform the upgrade scam and got them in trouble. He was also the one who basically told Kibao, the leader of the Aincrad Liberation Squad, that there's this special item that drops from the 5th floor boss, and basically he's the one causing the split. And the reason this is going to cause a problem is because, separate to this whole incident, the ALS and the DKB have been, at least some of the members, have been trying to start this group New Year's party, because the book takes place in the days leading up to and the day of New Year's in Aincrad. So members of the DKB and ALS are trying to do this party that's going to happen for New Year's, and the ALS are planning actually to raid the boss themselves on the day of this party. And this is obviously going to cause a rift, because it's this whole idea of like, we made this party to kind of join up, and you use that as a distraction to get an advantage. And the big question early on, before the plot really kicks into gear, is it someone behind the scenes trying to cause a rift between the groups, or are the groups just kind of shattering on their own? Is this just the ALS trying to get an advantage, or is it some people on the outside trying to like force the ALS to get an advantage and cause an incident? And that turns out to be the case, hence the influence of Laughing Coffin on the whole thing. And I will say, Laughing Coffin is never mentioned by name in this book, but in the author's notes at the end, Kawahara actually mentions that he hasn't mentioned Laughing Coffin yet, but he's basically saying that, look, this is the early stages of it, and you're going to see what happens there. So really interesting to see how that's happening. Even no allusions to the fact that like they have like tattoos or anything like that. That hasn't happened yet. So it's definitely implied that the Laughing Coffin hasn't like fully formed yet. It doesn't seem like it's a complete guild, but there's a group of people forming who want to cause player killing within the game. And while no one dies within this book, it's definitely kind of implying that this group is becoming more and more prevalent. They're going to cause more and more incidents as the player group gets kind of bigger, who's trying to tackle the front line stuff. It's fascinating what happens. Relating to some of the specifics of the plot, the item that is causing all this issue that people know about from the beta, hence why Poe knows about it, Kirito later figures out this is the case as well, is that the 5th floor boss drops an item called a guild flag, and if a member of your guild plants this flag in the ground in the middle of a battle, all members of that guild within a pretty big radius of the person with the flag gets like multiple buffs, and it's a super powerful item that will basically give whatever guild gets it an unbelievable advantage over the other one, and effectively would splinter and fracture the frontline player group, slow down progress within the game, and cause a big issue. And the plot kicks into gear in that Kirito doesn't want that to happen. We've seen in all of these books, he has been trying to basically not get overly involved with the guilds, but doing his best to keep them together. That they all obviously have a rivalry between the two main guilds, but he doesn't want to cause that to cause like a huge issue. So he kind of comes in and is trying to stop this from happening. And the conclusion that he comes to after a little bit of investigation, which I'll touch on in a minute, is that a lot of the independent players are going to have to take down this boss themselves. They get the guild flag. They're not going to use the guild flag, but they'll keep it out of the system, and they can figure out what to do with it after that. It's better that they get the flag and are potentially hated by both guilds rather than one guild gets it and the group fractures. The investigation that happens is basically after they overhear this meeting down below between Morte and Joe, which basically confirms that the ALS are going to kind of go against the party and use that as a distraction to take on the boss. They kind of decide, like, okay, we have to figure out, is this really happening because of manipulations from these kind of evil people looking for player killing to happen, or is it an actual issue between the ALS and the DKB? If it's an issue, they can't really get too big involved, but if it is someone who's trying to like force this sort of stuff to happen, then they really want to get involved. So what happens is they go to meet the person who is organizing the party from both sides. They find out that it's Shivata on behalf of the DKB, and on behalf of the ALS it's this new character, Litten. And it turns out that the two of them are dating. They're on separate guilds, but they're dating, they're a couple, and they make reference to that a lot. And they basically, they just kind of came together randomly, and they realized they really care about each other, and they want to make this party as a way to sort of bring the groups together. Maybe not force them into one guild, but to just promote some sort of a friendship between the two guilds. Because if they can get along, there's the potential for other people within both guilds to get along as well. Fair enough. And this confirms to them that, okay, it was a good-natured thing, that it wasn't some plan on behalf of the ALS to form this party and then use it as a distraction, that it was actually something that was planned between a lot of members of the guild, that they wanted to participate in this party. So it is a kind of manipulation on behalf of the kind of pre-proto kind of Laugh and Coffin members. So this prompts Kirito to decide we have to take it down. So the raid group that we get for this floor is Kirito, Asuna, Argo. They bring Neza on board from floor 2, the blacksmith guy who participated in the upgrade scam, who has the chakram weapon. They get Eagle's guild, the Bro Squad, which we find out that name. I don't think we knew that before. So it's him and then his 3 other guys. We get their names, but none of them are particularly notable massively as characters. They're just all friends. So that brings it up to 8. And then the last 4 members are, they get Shivata, they get Litten, and then they ask Shivata and Litten to bring one other member of their guild with them to bring it up to 12. So that's where we get Hafner and this other guy called Otan or something like that, I believe it is. Again, a lot of the kind of other side characters aren't massively important. The focus is Asuna, Kirito, Argo, Egil, Nezha, Litten and Shivata, and then the other ones are just there to make up the numbers so that they can actually take down the boss. The boss battle itself is really interesting, because once they formed a group they realized that, okay, they have Argo with them. She's done a lot of the quests kind of to figure out the way to get to the boss, and has basically shut down the amount of time that it's going to take them to get there really quickly. They're going to get there before the ALS. It's going to be fine because of Argo's help. So they basically skip past a lot of the labyrinth stuff because of the quest that Argo's figured out, and they face the boss. It's interesting in that he devotes a lot of time, Kawahara, to this boss battle, and I really appreciate it, because he set it up in the author's notes for Volume 3 that the 5th floor boss battle was the first milestone boss battle within the game, and he will spend more time on it, and he absolutely does that. They set it up that, okay, Kirito and Argo are going to go in first. They're going to do a kind of scout roll to figure out the kind of boss attack patterns. They're going to come out, plan it, and then properly take it on, and potentially go in and out a bunch of times before they properly beat it. What ends up happening is that the changes from the beta to the full game are so vast that their scouting attempt ends up being their kind of first attempt. Kirito and Argo go in there, they're completely surprised by what's going on. Argo ends up getting hit by the boss's attack the first time, and is nearly she loses a bit of her armor because the boss has this attack that actually crushes armor as well as takes away some of your health, and it's just really dangerous, and everyone's kind of coming up to look because they hear all the danger happening, and it just ends up being this kind of situation where the scouting kind of mission goes a little bit wrong. everyone kind of realizes, oh, we have to save them, and they kind of rush in, similar to the um, the big Starburst Stream boss battle from the episodes of the anime, where they kind of just go in to help and maybe get people out, but they kind of are forced and locked into it. It's a similar situation here. It turns out the gimmick of this boss is that it's in the beta it was just this golem in the middle. It had its head in the middle, and then it sent its like arms and legs like flying around the room. And it's similar, but it's different in that this way they explain it. The reason it's called the vacant Colossus is because the boss room is the boss, and it can basically force its stuff to kind of go in and out. It can like send its arms and legs kind of inside of the room, out of the room, head in and out, and stuff like that. It's it's a really interesting boss battle the way they explain it. There's all these lines of light on the floor, and if you step on lines of light, you activate the boss's attacks. And it's just this whole system of like, they kind of realized that if they'd sent a full raid group of like 48 players or something like that in, people would have been killed because there wouldn't have been enough space to avoid all the lines. And actually having a group of like 12 works because you can actually avoid all of the lines and kind of have a moment of calmness within the boss battle. And then you can trigger the lines yourself to get the arms and legs to attack and take them out. And you know, they go through the various stages of taking down its health bars and the changes in attack patterns, and how after the initial shock they kind of do calm down. There's a few incidents, like as I said, Argo at the start nearly gets taken out, but Kirito saves her. Shibata nearly gets killed. His armor is completely broken by one of the attacks, but Litten jumps in and saves him. It's a pretty cool like moment for that couple. He then reveals that actually I have a second set of armor. He puts that on, and it kind of solves that issue. And in the end, they manage to defeat the fifth floor boss battle without too much trouble. Realistically, no one dies. No one came overly close to dying, but it was just this desperate situation where, for the sake of the whole frontline player base, they kind of had to do this risky boss battle where they did it on their own with just like 12 players to save the frontline group going forward. It was, I think, really well done overall. So there's that. There's a little bit of an incident after that, in that they all kind of question like, okay, who got the guild flag? Was it Kirito, Asuna, Argo? Who got it? And no one's speaking up, and it's just this issue of like, oh, they kind of realize what's happened here is that one of the two members of the ALS or DKB must have gotten it and aren't telling anyone. So the focus turns on like Litten, Shibata, Hafner, and Ophon, or whatever his name is. And it turns out that the Ophon guy, I really can't remember what his name was. He's the one who had it. Let me find the name here. Okotan. Okotan, that's it. It turns out he got it and was planning to keep it a secret so he could advance the thing. And eventually he reveals it and gives the flag to Kirito. He kind of explains that I didn't do this to be selfish for our group. I did it because I felt like if our group had it, we could have really helped. But he kind of realizes like what this whole mission was about was to help the frontline player base. So he kind of gives up the flag. Everyone accepts and sort of understands what he was doing. So it's not really an issue of like it was this huge betrayal. He just had a moment of like when he saw the thing drop in his inventory, he kind of freaked out and temporarily kind of kept it a secret. It was just a little bit of drama that they added, nothing too crazy, because it's obviously one of the characters we knew the least, but just the reaction of the more reasonable players in the group compared to like if the whole group of ALS or DKB were there, it would have created a huge issue. But because it was a small group, they could deal with it, solve problems, no one needs to die, and so on. The result of this is that basically they unlock the 6th floor. Kirito waits there with the flag to basically answer to what he's done, basically, to the ALS, who are obviously going to do their early boss raid. So Kabao and his group comes up, Kirito's waiting there with the flag, and you can imagine the situation that happens because of their relationship. But basically what happens is it's like an interrogation of Kirito. It's, why did you do this? What are you planning on doing with the guild flag? You're a solo player. Are you planning to make your own guild with this and surpass us all? Is this like a trick that you've done? And Kirito answers them all fairly effectively that no, the reason I did this was because it would be unfair for either team to get the guild flag and then the other one not have it. It would have caused too many issues, so I formed this group together to get the guild flag and keep it out of both of your hands. And then he explains that basically his plan is, if another guild flag drops from an upcoming boss battle and a team gets it, I will give the flag to the team who didn't get it. That way it'll be even between the two of you. If one never drops, I'll keep it. And then he basically says that if, on the off chance that your two guilds form into one, I will immediately give the flag to your combined guild. And that will solve that. So Kibao's fairly okay with this. He's like, look, okay, I accept the fact that realistically we're never going to join guilds, but we'll keep you to the idea of if one of us gets it, the other one can take the other flag. So it's fairly reasonable. You can tell he's annoyed, but he's Kibao has been relatively reasonable in the last couple of books once he's calmed down. I think he's been able to realize that Kirito ultimately does have the kind of ultimate fate of the overall group and player base on his mind rather than kind of selfish goals. In that, I think he accepts the fact that Kirito is not going to be the one to make his own guild, and that causes them to leave. And I think it creates an interesting plot point of like, what is Kirito going to do with the flag? Because just based on the fact that, especially towards the end of the game, what we see, the ALS more takes control of the land, the town of beginnings, and they don't really do any frontline playing. So it's pretty clear that I think they're not a powerful guild. They don't have a guild flag or something like that. The DKB kind of disappear kind of at some point in the story, so it's clear that I don't think they become popular or get it. I'm thinking that what happens with this flag is that either Kirito is going to give it to Klein next time he meets him, and that will cause like Klein to form his own guild that we see, the was it Ruby and Kazan or something like that guild, or when we eventually get the moment when Kirito and Asuna kind of split and go their separate ways, Kirito is going to give Asuna the guild flag to take with her as part of the formation of the Knights of the Blood Oath. I think that could work really nicely in that it's, as I'll get into when I discuss the Kirito-Asuna relationship, Kirito is kind of training Asuna to kind of become that player who could lead a guild on her own. And I think him finally deciding that this is the moment for them to kind of go their separate ways, Asuna to kind of advance on her own, giving her this kind of item that will instantly get her a position in a guild or make her own guild successful, works really well, I think. And it would make sense for why this other guild that doesn't exist right now, Knights of the Blood Oath, suddenly becomes the key frontline player group, as opposed to the other ones. I think that makes sense. So it's either one of those two things in terms of my perspective on it. I suppose there's always a chance the Laughing Coffin could like steal it somehow and they use that as their guild flag, but I don't really know. So there's that. I'll cover the Kirito and Asuna relationship last. There's two other things I want to cover just prior to that. Litten as a character. They do give her a little bit of like a, I suppose, backstory to explain why she's suddenly important. The reason she is suddenly recruited by the ALS is because she is revealed to be the character in the game who has the best armor at this stage of the game. She has steel armor, which is insane at this stage of the game, because that's like, they don't say a floor that the steel armor is suited for, but they explain that she always wanted to be a tank within the game. She started relatively late. She stayed in the town of beginnings for the first month and then started her quest. She found an iron deposit that basically had a glitch on it where it was infinite, but it lasted 30 minutes, like it was fixed within 30 minutes. So she effectively got enough iron in that 30 minutes to make full steel armor. And they used this as a way to kind of introduce the concept and introduce Liz for the first time. She explains that a female blacksmith, they don't mention Elizabeth by name, a female blacksmith helped her to decide what armor to get, what to do with it, and so on, and stuff like that. So I think that's really cool foreshadowing. because Asuna seems to take an interest in this idea of like a female blacksmith that seems helpful, and it seems to set up like their friendship, and then why Kirito only later meets Liz. That once Asuna goes off on her own, she potentially forms the friendship with Liz, and then Kirito comes in the episode that we see. I just thought that was fun, like a way to explain why this character suddenly is really important and has the really powerful armor. It was a fun story, definitely. Nothing huge. It's explained within a page or two, but just a fun little thing. But yeah, let's move on to the last section of the video: the Kirito-Asuna relationship. What happens with the two of them in this book? The main gist of it is that they're kind of both dealing with the results of the question that was asked at the end of the last book, which is, let me just get it up here, I have it marked, they mentioned it again. The question Asuna asked Kirito at the end of the last book: how long are you planning to work with me? And Kirito answers, until you're strong enough to not need me. And effectively, like with Asuna's side of the story at the start, it's her really thinking about what Kirito meant by what he said. It's her over-analyzing to some extent what he said. That, does he think I'm not strong enough right now? Is he only staying with me because I'm weak, or whatever? What is his actual goal here? Like, is he purposefully keeping our relationship as just partners, we'll never be friends, and all this sort of stuff? And it, as the her section of the story goes on, she tries to prove herself. She's constantly asking herself the question, like, am I good enough? What can I do? And she tries to solve some of the quests on her own, and early on you see her kind of struggle a bit, that the quest that she happens to try involves astral monsters, and she's afraid of them, and that causes an issue, that she requires Kirito to help her because she just becomes so afraid in that situation. The situation that led to Kirito and Asuna overhearing the conversation between Morte and Joe, early Laughing Coffin members, was basically that Kirito went out in search of Argo, who wasn't responding to messages, on his own. Asuna followed him and kind of lost track of him, and got herself into a bit of a mess within the dungeon. She faced an astral monster, fell into a trap, lost her sword, tried to get it back, eventually does kind of get a really big moment where she does something pretty amazing, that she's kind of hiding. Kirito is initially first talking to the Laughing Coffin members, and she just like darts out of cover, like distracts Joe, who had killed the monster, to get her sword, takes the sword from him, and they kind of say this cool moment that like within 3 seconds Asuna had got her sword back, and Kirito was impressed. It was a nice little moment that shows that in a like pretty heated situation she can do this sort of stuff. And then, but also you can see that she's dealing with stuff like, after hearing about Kirito's battle with Morte and the whole PK thing, she wants PvP fighting lessons from Kirito, and he's fine with it. Okay, let's do a first strike duel between the two of us, and I'll teach you some stuff. But she becomes a little bit too afraid at the start of this. She and Argo eventually have a kind of mock PvP duel where they use like branches instead of swords, and she kind of turns around on the idea, gets an idea about how to fight people one-on-one. But by the end of the book, she kind of fully like accepts that I need PvP lessons, and Kirito also to himself says like, I will have to give her a proper lesson at PvP, because of all this danger happening with this introduction of the Laughing Coffin. He's aware that this is going to become a big thing, and people need to know how to fight PvP. So yeah, there's a lot of little things with Asuna just questioning like, what does that mean, the whole idea of like, unless you're strong enough to need me, and all that sort of stuff. And the other side of it is that when Kirito realizes that Argo's not responding to messages, he reveals to Asuna that he's actually friends with Argo in the game. They've registered each other as friends, which is something that Kirito and Asuna haven't done yet. And in her mind, she's kind of constantly asking herself, why isn't he asking that? Is he drawing a line here that this is the closest we're ever going to be? I'd be fine if he just asked. I would accept the friend request. So what's happening here? Like, she's kind of questioning why he hasn't done that, but he has done it with other people. And she eventually comes to the conclusion that, like, okay, based on what he said about, until you're strong enough to not need me and stuff like that, she says the line, fine, one day I'll ask you for that friend status once I'm as tough as you. So in her mind, she says, she doesn't say this out loud. She says to herself, that when I feel strong enough that I can help Kirito and I'm as strong as him, then I will ask him for the friend request. That it's more about like the equality of their relationship for her, rather than it being just a simple thing of like, we're relatively close, let's just register each other as friends. That the friend for Asuna is actually a really important thing that represents the kind of gap between their kind of skill level at this point. For her, I suppose what she's thinking about is that Argo and Kirito are friends because they can offer each other something. Argo is the information person within the game. Kirito can use that. Kirito is often one of the super frontline players. He can help Argo get other information that she wouldn't otherwise get. What can Asuna offer Kirito is kind of the question that's kind of presented here for her. Why Asuna doesn't feel like she can do as much early on in this book. But yeah, there's some other really nice stuff. After their little PvP duel that they have with the branches, we get a little moment between Argo and Asuna where they're in the bath together, and basically Asuna first asks Argo the question, why do you put yourself at so much risk to get information for the frontline players when they just treat you like a beta player? And she just asked the question of like, part of it is because I'm a beta tester and I feel that I should because I know this stuff. And then she kind of hints that like there's something more. She says, sorry, but any more than that will cost you. Still, thanks for inviting me to this incredible bath. I'll give you one piece of information on the house. So she kind of hints that there's something more to the reason why she puts so much effort into putting herself on the line, risking herself to get all this information. And that's really interesting. I really want to know what that situation is, especially because Argo apparently doesn't play much of a role in the later stages of the game. So what happens to her, or what's the situation there? But in relation to the Kirito Asuna relationship, the key point here is that Argo kind of turns the situation around for her, and she says, earlier you said that I didn't need to do this dangerous reconnaissance alone, and that I could do like Keyboy and join the frontline gang. But she says, but I think the reason Keyboy doesn't brave the dangers of solo adventuring isn't because this way is more safe. And Asuna says, then why? And she says, ain't it obvious? Because he's got you. So Argo kind of presents this different perspective on it, in that I know Kirito from the beta. I know him just from being friends with him. He tends to do stuff solo, like all the time. That's his thing. Him sticking around with you in a partnership for so long is a pretty big thing for him. That's different. He wouldn't stick around with you if he didn't want to. And from Argo's perspective, she's seen how close they are. The reason he's sticking around with her is because, yeah, he's got her. He accepts and respects what Asuna brings to his kind of journey throughout the game. And I think it's a really interesting one because we never really get Asuna's reaction to this, because that is the page when we switch from Asuna's perspective to Kirito's perspective. Yeah, the last major kind of relationship moment for them would be towards the very end of the book. Asuna is in the room with Kirito when he talks to Kibao and explains the whole flag situation, what he's going to do with it, and the interrogation happens. Kibao leaves after that, happy with it. Kirito's happy with how it went as well. But Asuna kind of burst into tears after this, once they're alone. And Kirito's like shocked by this, like, it all went really well, everything's fine, no one died, the flag situation's over as well. Why are you crying? And she just says, why do you have to be talked to like that? After how hard you worked, after you risked your life to fight for the sake of the group, for the sake of everyone trapped in here, after you bowed to them and apologized, why do you deserve this? This is wrong. They make their guilds, put all their friends in, do whatever they want, bicker with each other. You ran yourself ragged for their sake, only to get accused like that. It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And then Kirito answers this with, that's what I chose to happen. I chose to not join a group. I'm not fighting because I want people to recognize me or praise me. As long as I can protect myself and those around me, the rest doesn't matter to me. So I don't have the right to be recognized or praised. You don't need to cry for ... Asuna interrupts him and says, I'm the one who decides who I should cry for. And says, in that case, I'll be the one to praise you, Kirito. I'll do whatever I can for you, whatever you say. And we get this kind of thought from Kirito. Later, much later, Asuna would confide in me. A part of me was worried about the possibility that you would say something really crazy, with a gentle, beaming smile. So the hint that what Kirito was about to say was almost going to like border into kind of romantic stuff, why they stick around each other for so long. and Asuna stopped that from happening. But it is a kind of really close moment between them in that it's Asuna kind of accepting the fact that like Kirito puts himself out there so much and basically puts so much pressure on his own shoulders, even though he doesn't directly interact with everyone else. He does so much for everyone else that Asuna at this point in the story is kind of accepting that I will support you in everything you do. That is what I can do for you right now, and it's definitely related to the Argo moment I just talked about before, because he's got you, that Kirito in some ways has the strength to do all this and help keep the guilds together because he has Asuna with him. And it's a really cool moment because what they also do in this book is that after the whole Laughing Coffin thing, Asuna has this scare with her sword, they confront the Laughing Coffin members. After they leave, Asuna kind of is just kind of like, it all hits her and she's just kind of like, oh, that was so, I could have died and stuff like that. And Kirito kind of comforts her, he kind of holds her and like strokes her head to kind of calm her down. And at the end of the book, it kind of hits Kirito, everything that he's just done, the amount of pressure he put on himself. And Asuna is the one to kind of hold him and stroke his head. It's the kind of reverse. And it's just kind of highlighting that they are becoming equals in some extent, but Kirito does still is aware that he needs to train Asuna to become stronger. So I just like that moment of like Asuna is like aware of like how much he puts out there and the lack of respect he gets from basically everyone else, especially the main guilds. And it still is keeping her in this situation where she is very anti-guild. And ultimately Kirito in his own dialogue says that he's trying to eventually get her to the point where he doesn't need him anymore, where she's strong enough to not need me, like I don't need to be with her, and she can join a guild of her own. But she at this point is completely against the idea of guilds full stop. Why would she ever want to join a guild is the question. It's really interesting how eventually that's going to happen. But yeah, I think it's a really solid one for their relationship. It doesn't really present any sort of a rift between them, but it continues this whole idea of when will Asuna get to the point where she is as strong as Kirito, and Kirito feels that he should separate himself from her, and all this other stuff that's going to happen. That's basically all I wanted to say about the book. There's a scene at the end where like after they're having a celebration. It's basically the last chapter. Po comes up behind Kirito in a safe zone, even though Kirito isn't aware it's a safe zone at that point, and basically threatens him with this dagger. He says it's like +4 poison, +4 paralysis, come with me. Kirito figures it out, and they have a kind of fight in a safe zone, so they can't actually hurt each other, but it's this idea of them using the impact of the kind of what do they call it, the like anti-criminality code to like burst each other apart and create distance between them. Eventually Kirito kind of scares Po off, but it's just this moment of him saying it's showtime is the one thing that confirms it's Po, because his name is never mentioned in this whole book. And it's just this way to end the book where it kind of confirms that player killers and groups that only care about murder within the game are becoming a thing. So it's been fairly lighthearted and progressive up to now. Like only Diavel has died as far as we're aware. At least that's been a focus of the story. No one's really been in too much of a danger of dying, but there's a hint that all these other threats are coming in. There's the game itself, but there's also now players who are trying to cause that to happen as well, and it's becoming a real problem. So overall, I'd say excellent book. I highly recommend anyone who's a fan of the Progressive series to pick it up, especially now that it's out in English. This is a really good read. People who love the Kirito Asuna relationship will like this one. You get focus on characters like Argo, the start of the Laughing Coffin, and a real focus on the issues between the Aincrad Liberation Squad and the Dragon Knights Brigade. So I really like this whole plot that's going on right now with the early guilds being a focus, Kirito and Asuna, like when will they kind of eventually split up, because we know that has to happen, and all this other sort of stuff. So I'm really impressed with this one. It was a year wait basically for between this and the previous book, but it was well worth the wait. I just hope the pace picks up and we get more of these books. So yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.